Thanks, everybody. I'm Chef Michael Kloss. I'm the executive chef of City Market, Onion River Co-op. Tonight, we are going to be making gumbo. One of my favorite things to make. I've been making it for many years. There's lots of different ways to make it. We're going to focus on really making a dark roux tonight, which here's a finished product. We're going to head over to the stove in a minute. I'm going to show you how to work through this and get it to this nice dark color. So we'll talk more about that in a few minutes. But exciting to be cooking with everyone tonight. Once we get the roux going, it's going to be a good time because you have to stir it constantly. It'll be a good time to ask any questions. So happy to answer any questions. But so we'll get right into it. I'm going to walk over to the stove. So I'll be off camera for a second and we'll start making some roux. Good? Yep. Wonderful. All right, so really the first thing we'll do is I'm going to get the rice going because it's a garnish. So I have my pot of rice here. I'm going to add some water. We're going to make a classic rice pilaf method. So it's about a 1.5 to 1 ratio. 1 part rice, 1.5 part liquid or water in this instance. I like to drop a little butter in there. Put a little salt. Really, pilaf method is really we're going to finish in the oven. So we're going to bring the rice to a boil. We're going to cover it, and we're going to put it in the oven. Classically, you would transfer it into like a, what we call a hotel pan or a high-sided pan, but with a nice wide bottom soft spot like this, we'll be able just to bring it up to a boil, stir it, cover it, put it in the oven for about 15 to 20 minutes. I put a little extra liquid in it just for the gumbo. I like the rice to be a little bit more cooked, really no tooth to it. You want it nice and soft so it kind of absorbs and almost helps thicken the gumbo as it sits in there as well. So we'll just add a little salt. That's pretty simple. We have so many other flavors going on. I like to keep the rice nice and simple.
There goes that fan.
Yeah, here comes the fan. So I'll turn up the volume. So here we got a nice cast iron skillet. Obviously, if you don't have one of these, just a heavy bottom, saute pan or sauce pot, sautoir, as they call it, high sides. The oil is going to be hot. One thing with this roux, if you made roux before, generally, classically, just like a blonde roux, what it's called for thickening gravies and sauces, we generally use butter. But since we're making a dark roux, if we used butter, it would most likely burn. It's a much longer process than we use oil. It's going to help it really achieve that nice dark color and really add some flavor into the gumbo. So we got it on medium, low heat. Just put my hand over it. I can feel it. The more times we make this, we feel a little more adventurous with high heat. We feel comfortable. If you're a beginner to dark roux, just keep it nice and low and take your time to stir. So we're going to have the flour in. Stir it. See, we get a little bit of sizzle. I'm not sure if you can see it. Really, the key is you want to cook this down nice and slow and see a nice dark color. So I don't have all the flour at one time, just because I don't want to be flour, oil. So I'd rather add a little bit of flour at a time. Looking for a wet sand consistency. Then too stiff. The harder to stir, the more it cooks, and it's a greater chance of burning. Take a look. Add a little bit more flour.
People are having a little bit of a harder time hearing you, so.
I'll show you what we can do. So Gary, click on me. You see that?
Yep, nice golden color on that.
See, it's thick. It's not quite real thick sand. Like I said, it's going to be a lot easier to handle like this, and we can just add a little more flour at the end to help thicken it up. So turn it up a bit. So now we good. I don't know if there's any questions in the chat. But I'm just going to stir this for a minute or two. So if anyone has any questions, I'm happy to answer them.
Someone just asked, what's your preferred oil?
For this, vegetable oil, canola oil, definitely don't want to use like an olive or peanut oil just because of the flavors. You don't want those flavors to be too strong. So tonight, our gumbo, so there's a few different ways to make gumbo. You can think in many ways. We're using just roux tonight. A little bit, I would say non-traditional, but a lot of people thinking it with okra. I myself find okra to make the texture a little slimy. If you want to use okra a lot, you don't have a lot of experience with okra, it's really hard not to take the slime out. So I like to make mine just straight roux. If you're a big okra fan, means you cut it up and put it in there. I would recommend cooking it separately, trying to get as much of the slimy texture out of it, and put that in it at the end. Or what I've done sometimes as well is I fry it.
So I see a couple people asking if he can take his mask off. We require masks at all times in our building, even regardless of social distancing. So yes, even though I am further than 6 feet away, Chef is going to keep his mask on. We'll just ask him to speak up a little bit, and he'll have a chance to repeat some things once the fan kicks off as well. So sorry if you're having sound issues, but we cannot unmask. Yeah, there's a couple people asking.
We're going to move over here. Hopefully you can hear me a little better. So we got a hot plate here. Seems to be working well. Holding the heat. So I'm going to continue to stir.
Matt asks if you have any butter in there or just veg oil.
This is just oil. Just oil. We're going to use a little butter in it later, which will give it a little bit more rich texture, but that's going to be to cook the vegetables in the pan. In the roux alone, it's just oil. There are different ways to make dark roux if you research it. Sometimes you can use some butter. Generally, those methods are made, I've seen a lot of times in the oven, where people leave it in the oven on a very low heat overnight, and it naturally turns dark. It's a little harder. You have to have the right size pan. But I've always found just using the straight oil works really well. It's kind of bulletproof. This is going to need a little more flour. I'm going to go over and cover the rice, put it in the oven. Then we can talk about some more things. Be right back. Good. So rice is boiling, looking good. Give it a little stir. We're going to cover that and put it in the oven. It's going to take about 18 to 20 minutes. Put a few things over here.
Maybe if you want to repeat a little bit of what you said about the roux when the fan kicked on over here. People are saying the sound's better.
Sure.
Over by this mic.
So you can see here we're already starting to go. I like to keep a nice low heat, or else you will get a little burning. So I'm going to turn it down a little bit. I'm going to go grab that flour. There we go. And we're really looking forward to the roux. Like I said, a nice dark color. It'll start to smell, as Carrie pointed out earlier, almost like popcorn, like butter popcorn. Nice nutty aroma.
What's the oven temp for baking the rice?
350 for the rice.
350.
So we're looking good here. Now, if I was making this roux to like thickened turkey dinner, like a butter style, this is about the color we'd be looking for, what we call a blonde roux. Then we're going to keep stirring it, keeping an eye on it. Since we already have dark roux made, I'm going to turn it down nice and low so we can talk about a few other things. So you really don't want it to get away from you. Good. Any other questions?
Yep, someone asked if while you're here you could recap the rice method since they couldn't quite hear you.
Sure. So it's a classic pilaf method. So it's the general ratio is 1 part rice to 1.5 parts liquid, generally water, a little salt, and I put some butter in there. And what you do is just put everything in the pot, bring it to a boil, cover it, and then put it in the oven for about 15 to 20 minutes, depending on the size pot you're using and how high and how narrow it is. Classic pilaf method is made in a pan, so you would boil everything and then dump it into a shallow pan, cover it, and put it in the oven. So that's more of the 15 to 17 minute range. If you're making it in a pot like we did, which is just a little easier and it's less dishes later, I would let it go for about 20. For the gumbo, just to recap, I put a little extra liquid in there because for the gumbo, I like the rice to be a little bit not overcooked, but not as toothy or al dente as I normally would like it, just because I like it to soak up some of the kind of the gumbo juice and, you know, help thicken it.
Someone asked, the recipe only had 1.5 cups of flour. It looks like you made a lot more.
I did, yes. I make a lot more just because we have large vessels in here, so I'm making it a little bit larger for it. It's a little easier for you to see it too. If I made it just sort of in the smaller recipe size portion, it would be harder to show on the camera. So making everything a little larger.
There we go, and the fan came back up.
Carrie and I are gonna have a feast later.
Oh yeah. Well, and I think you've made roux before when we did the gravy video, and you can freeze it, right?
Yeah, this roux can be frozen, refrigerated for quite some time. So definitely, I think it says it in the recipe, it can definitely be made like the day before, like you're having a party and you don't want the house to smell like the roux or get too hot. You can make the roux before and just refrigerate it. So we'll keep that going. We'll put this dark roux to the side.
Someone asks if you use any particular type of rice when you do gumbo.
Regular white rice, long grain white rice. You can use, you know, like really anything. You could use brown rice if you wanted. I wouldn't use like the real aromatic, something like a jasmine or a risotto style rice. I would stay away from. It really just, I recommend plain white rice. If you're in a hurry, you know, and you can even just use the quick rice, works well too. So we've heard this a lot on cooking shows before, the Trinity. So the onion, celery, and bell peppers. So these are the main vegetables in the gumbo. As you can see, they're, you know, nice bite size. You want them to fit on the spoon. So we got a nice blend there. I got a lot of different colors, which we can cut up. So we're just gonna small dice. I like to take the bottom off and then just cut the sides. You could do the roll method, which I'll show you on the next one, but just cut this. We got a compost starter over here.
Someone asked, does gumbo always need roux?
I would always use roux. I've never heard of it being thickened with just the okra. I guess it would be possible if you put a lot in there. Some people thicken it with the filet, like if you ever heard of filet gumbo, which is the sassafras powder. But usually always roux is a part of it. I like the questions. Keep them coming.
It's a great question coming through.
So really any color peppers will work. We have a lot of different varieties downstairs in the store, so I was just grabbing whatever looked pretty. So we'll continue to cut. And by all means, you could put, you know, this is the classic, like I said, the Trinity, the classic 3, but you can put whatever you wanted in there. We're gonna do the chicken and the shrimp, so it goes well with this vegetable blend. I've made, like a fall style gumbo that has turkey and turkey sausage, and, I put in roasted squash in there, and it's really good. So you can definitely play to the seasons. So I like to put the celery on a little bit of a bias. Makes it a little easier to eat and cook.
Someone says they like the answers. Thank you very much.
Oh, you're welcome. So this should be enough veggies. You'll see here for the garnish, we save the celery leaves because this is a nice garnish on top, even though it just says garnish with scallions in the recipe. But this makes, if you get a nice stalk of celery, I would recommend saving that. Roux looking good. You see it's starting to get a little darker. I'm just going to turn it up a bit.
Yep, someone just asked actually, the roux that we're seeing now, is that what the final roux will look like, just dark brown?
This will be about the texture. Maybe believe it or not, as it cooks, it'll start to soften up right towards the end. Basically what happens is the flour can only absorb so much oil, so then I'll add a little bit more flour at the end, just to kind of bind it. But this is pretty much the consistency we're going to be looking at here. I put a little bit, you'll see in the recipe, a little bit of the Cajun seasoning right at the end, so that helps darken it up as well. And I've worked at restaurants before where instead of using chicken stock, we use beef stock, which will get it really nice and dark as well. You could use seafood stock if you had it, like lobster broth, you could mix it. Maybe duck stock if you're making like a duck gumbo. It's nice.
I love it. Just smells like popcorn in here. I love it.
Yeah, so this is looking good. We got our veggies. So preferred sausage and andouille sausage. So this is a nice Cajun Louisiana style smoked sausage. Usually buy it, it's already cooked, fully cooked. It's got a nice texture, nice and spicy, a nice smoke to it. If you can see here, we're just going to cut it into sort of bias cut pieces here, kind of like this. Oblique is the classic French term for this. You kind of make a cut, do a half turn, do a cut. Can you see that?
Yeah, I'll zoom in a little bit. People
Yeah.
put your hands.
Good?
Yep, good.
So oblique cut, half turn, cut. This is nice for veggies like carrots, oblique cut carrots, and you make glazed carrots with chicken or whatever. It's a nice cut. Good for this as well. You can just slice it, but I find it sometimes will curl up and it kind of dries out. So I don't like it too thin. I like the oblique cut.
There goes the pan again. Sorry.
Yep. So we'll continue to do this for a minute. And then we'll talk about the chicken and the shrimp. So we keep piling that on. Put that over there. You could use chorizo as well. Doesn't always come usually smoked or pre-cooked, which is fine. You could crumble it and cook it that way, or pre-cook it or grill it. But I find the smokiness and the spiciness in the andouille is really perfect. Just gonna cut one more length. I'm gonna stir this. So you can see it getting nice and dark there. Almost a little too much. You see how it went away. Didn't quite burn, but almost. So important to keep stirring. There. There we go. Good. Can everyone see this?
Yep.
I'm actually going to move this underneath there. It's going to get pretty smoky as we get towards the end. So I'm going to move this over. Super low. Turn off super low. It's going to let it get nice and dark now. It'll cook nice and slowly. Excellent. All right, finish up the sausage here. We just got a little bit of garlic that we're gonna use. You can slice it. I'll give it a little smash first for this. And then just with some rough cut. So I'm not going to use a ton of garlic, just because the andouille has a good garlic flavor in it as well. So we're looking good there. Turn this off. Chicken and the shrimp. So we have some nice strips and chunks of chicken breast. You use chicken thigh if you wanted. Chicken tenders, anything will work. And then we have some peeled and deveined shrimp. I like it with the tail off just because it's all going to go in there. Some people like to pick it out with the tail. You could leave it on, but I like to just go for it. So generally I'll keep the tail off.
I agree. I don't like tails.
So the recipe that I gave you calls for grilling these items, which is more than fine. Our grill is way over to the right, so I thought we'd char them and we have a nice cast iron skillet. We'll blacken them in a pan here tonight, but either one would work. Depends on how much space you have, especially since you got like a lot of things going on the stove. Maybe the grill may be nice, especially in the summer. But we'll char it here tonight just to keep everyone in camera view. So that being said, a little tip off the recipe. I know it calls for herbs and oil because we're going to grill it. I'll put a little bit of oil, but if you're going to char it, like truly blacken it in a pan, you don't want too much because you want it to get nice and charred. So I'm just going to put a little bit of oil.
So if you're wearing gloves to prevent cuts or just to keep clean?
Just to keep clean. I'm actually going to stir these with each hand, then I'll change them out.
And someone asked, is it always skinless chicken?
It doesn't have to be, but the roux is pretty fatty. We're going to put butter in there as well. So, but it doesn't have to be. So we're just going to put some rosemary, some thyme. Just going to break it up. You can take it off too if you wanted, but it's fine either way. Okay, just keep breaking it. That's enough. And for this, because the Cajun, I gave you a Cajun seasoning recipe. It has plenty of salt in it, so you notice there's not a lot of salt and pepper going on. I just like to season everything with the Cajun. So that's what we're going to do. Now, blackening it, we're going to put a lot in here. So I'm going to put a good amount. And then we got gloves, so I'm just going to mix it up like this. Smells great. This is looking good. So I'm going to take the gloves off. Quick hand wash over here. All right, so we have our meats ready. We have the veggies ready. We got the sausage and the garlic ready, so we're looking good right now. I'm going to bring some of this stuff over, and then we can start the process of actually making it. We're back on over here?
Yep.
Good. See our roux, nice and dark. Get in there. Turn it up a little bit. Smells great. Almost there. All right. I got a nice big cast iron on here. This is what we're going to blacken with. I'll put another one on too. We're looking good there. This is our pot we're going to cook the veggies in. This is our stock, which I've pre-warmed. I'm just going to move it over here so you can see. As I'm on, we'll be talking a little louder. Can everyone hear me?
It sounds okay from my end if everybody's doing okay.
Remember to keep stirring that roux. As you can see, this is definitely why I want to do it ahead of time. Looking great. I'm going to go down. Some more of my stuff.
Someone asked, why does the roux have to be that dark?
Why does the roux have to be that dark? Really to help the gumbo be nice and dark. You see most gumbos are really, really dark and rich. I mean, really to get that flavor, that real nice, nutty, deep kind of signature gumbo flavor comes from the flavor of the roux. And I think if you've never made it before, once you actually make the roux for yourself, you'll sort of understand that better because you'll be able to smell the roux and really connect it with the flavor of the gumbo when you're eating it after. And you'll know if it is like a little bitter, you know, that maybe it did get a little scorched in the bottom of the pan. Almost there. It's going to drop a little olive oil.
Somebody else wants to know why you didn't cut up the fresh herbs that you put in with the meats, why you didn't bake the pieces.
I just chopped them up just because I wanted to get it done quickly, and you're really just going to marinate for a few minutes. And then, since we're putting so much seasoning on them anyway for this method, not quite as important as if we were putting them on the grill, just because there's a lot of herbs in the blackening seasoning. So if we're putting extra blackening seasoning on it, or Cajun seasoning, you'll see in that recipe there's a lot of the same herbs in there, just in dry format. So it's pretty herbaceous with that seasoning on it. We'll start with shrimp.
The fan goes off and then it'll kick back on immediately.
You don't want too much oil in the pan because you do want it to blacken and get nice and charred. You don't really want it to fry. We'll put the shrimp in here. Smells good. Can everyone see this? Yeah?
Yep. There's a nice sizzle in the background too.
Any questions about this? Or?
Not so far.
Okay. Not necessary as well. I think just straight seafood gumbos where you make the gumbo broth and then towards the end you just sort of float the seafood in based on what it is. So you put the shrimp in first and then maybe oysters in right at the end. And you could just simmer them in there. It's another option. It's a little quicker, a little less work, a little less dishes. Carrie likes to do dishes, I guess, so that's what she said.
Everybody always says that. They're like, I feel so bad you're doing all these dishes after I do class. And I'm like, I love dishes. This is the best part of my day. Get to eat food and then do dishes.
That's looking good. We'll do the chicken now. Yeah, separate ladles. Sounds good too. Like I said, you can use turkey. You put some of those herbs in there too. Turkey's nice. You get sausages, a couple different styles of sausage.
Someone has a question about your seafood gumbo. They said if you add oysters, are you breading them first?
No, so how I made it in the past, no. We literally just shove the oysters and just kind of float them in, literally right at the end, right when you're about to serve it, because you can't eat it raw. So you just float them at the end, just so they kind of just start to shrink a little bit. Very popular in the restaurants, the gumbo oyster and the andouille. Roux almost there. I'm just going to turn it up a bit just so you can see. This is looking good. Gonna add a little more oil now. Then we're gonna get the gumbo going here.
This kitchen smells amazing. I wish people could have like smell-o-vision, because you've got the buttered popcorn of the roux, and then now we're getting the Cajun seasoning of the meats, and it smells so good.
So we're gonna put a little butter in the pan here. That's going. Down the hot quickly. Put on this roux. Almost good.
Oh, and the pan.
That's looking good. So the shrimp are looking good. Actually, just going to turn this off because we don't want them to overcook. Just turn it off and finish it in the pan. Chicken is good also. We want to turn that. Oh, that Cajun seasoning. Kind of glad I asked.
Yeah.
Alright, so I'll sort of slow them up a bit. Where we want it to be. Gonna add some garlic. Smells great. We're gonna add some of our veggies. Gonna cook those down. Get this together. Chicken's looking good. Let's get it up.
Yeah.
Nice and dark. Depending on that roux. Something like the chicken. There's a couple ways you can do it. If you're worried about the chicken not being cooked enough before you put it in the gumbo, you put the chicken in the oven and make sure it's cooked all the way, or you can just simmer it in the gumbo once you get it made, which is what we'll probably do. Get a few more garnishes to work on at the end. So once you get this going, that's what we'll do. So this is looking great.
Tilt it towards the, yeah, there you go.
Yeah.
Perfect.
So it's good. And got my Cajun seasoning, wet a little bit.
Gotcha.
and then add the sausage, and then the liquid right after. I do like considering the sausage in there just because a lot of the flavor will impart itself into the gumbo itself. A little bit extra spice added to it. It's looking great. Alright, this is our going through. Let's see. Connection jar. So what we're going to do next. I'm going to sprinkle some Cajun on it. That this helps bring out a lot of the spices in the areas, like the oils. And it helps get it a little dark too. And we're just going to stir that. That's ready to go. So one of the reasons you make it ahead of time as well, which we didn't mention, is just give me 1 sec, I'll come over here. One of the reasons we make the roux ahead of time as well is when you're working with roux, it's always sort of a opposite. So if your liquid is hot, the roux should be room temperature or cold, or vice versa. This prevents lumps, and it really helps the roux cook out properly. It's never, being classically trained, it's never the best idea to add hot roux to hot liquid. It's sometimes going to flash separate it, so like all the water and butter will just completely curdle and separate, and then it just makes it a lot harder to thicken and really cook out the flour. So always recommend cold roux, hot liquid, hot roux, cold liquid.
A couple more questions while you're there if you have time.
Yeah, we're good.
What's the shelf life of the remaining Cajun seasoning and the best way to store it so you have extra?
The Cajun seasoning you could just put in like a mason jar and it'll last forever. The roux itself, even with the dry seasonings in there and the oil and the flour, it's good in the refrigerator for at least a week. If you have like a vacuum sealer, you can vacuum seal it and freeze it, or just put it in a Ziploc bag and freeze it. It'll last forever.
And if you could go over cooking the chicken, again, I think some of this, you can either cook it in the oven or in the...
Yeah, so the chicken, depending on how thick you cut the chunks, and how far along you are with actually making the gumbo broth itself, if you're nervous about the chicken being raw, you could blacken the chicken and have it pre-cooked and just drop it in there. Or you can sear it, cook it about 80%, and then just finish simmering it in the gumbo. It's really a choice.
Awesome. And
same with the seafood.
Okay. Was that butter and olive oil to saute the veggies, or just butter with the veggies?
It was just butter and the veggies, and I used a little olive oil for the shrimp.
On the seafood. Okay, great.
But,
thank you.
If you only have canola, you could use that for everything. If you only had oil, completely fine.
And Nat just says, wow, that grew. So,
yeah.
thumbs up on that one.
Alright, so we're going to add our liquid. We're going to bring that to the boil, turn it down to a simmer, and then we're going to take the roux we made earlier that's cooled down, and we're going to add that. You see in the instructions it says add in stages. That's important because it takes a few minutes for the flour to cook out and thicken. So if you put it all in at once, you have a much greater chance of it being too thick, like cement. So it's better to put a little bit in, let it simmer a bit, get it to the consistency you want in stages. Does everyone able to hear that?
Yep, sounds good.
Rice is looking good. See the rice, nice and well steamed, cooked. If it was a classic French pilaf, you would put a little bay leaf and onion in there and some cloves, but like I said, we got a lot of flavors going on. And you would just kind of fork that rice to fluff it. So that's what we'll do with the spoon or whatnot. It's kind of fluff it, and then there you go. And there's a few ways, actually. So here's the rice here. You can just take the back of this. You see, it's looking nice and fluffy. Just kind of run it back and forth. This is how I like it. A little nice and soft. That's going to go really well in there. So let's put that to the side. A few ways you can put it right in the gumbo if you're going to eat it all in one sitting. I've also seen it where you can kind of shape it in the molds. You can put like a little ring mold in the bowl and put the gumbo around. Just depending on how much rice you put in, it will soak up the liquid. So if you're making a large batch and plan on eating it for a few days, I would keep the rice on the side and just add it to the amount that you're heating up. Or else if you put too much rice in there, then it'll just soak up all the gumbo broth, which is still good, but it would be more like a kind of like a stew or porridge than an actual soup.
Someone asked, it seems like a lot of Cajun seasoning. Will it be very spicy? Could I only use it for the blackening part? I like the spice of the sausage to add the spice flavor.
You could. I like to put a little bit all the way throughout. I like my gumbo super spicy, and I will admit I like things personally a little on the saltier side. But you could make it as spicy as you want just by eliminating those stages, using just regular salt and pepper or another herb combination, and just letting the andouille itself spice in the gumbo, for sure.
Awesome.
So we'll leave that over here for now. I'm gonna go check on the liquid.
Yep.
We're looking good. We're almost up to where we need to be. Turn our chicken back on.
Have you added the stock to the vegetables at this point?
I have.
Okay, can you tilt it towards can you tilt the camera so you
Yeah.
can see it?
There you go.
There you go, yep, perfect, yeah, we've added the stock in at this point.
Well, we're gonna bring that stock up to a boil and then turn it down to a simmer, and that's when we're gonna add the roux in the stages. To help thicken it. Continue to cook your chicken a bit. This is looking great. There, looking good. Gonna cook that in the pan for another minute or two. We've got the roux. This is our roux that's been sitting. You can see this will look like this in a little bit after sitting. If you were to refrigerate it, you may get a little more separation of the oil. So if you refrigerate it, take it out the next day, and you notice there's like a ½ inch of oil on the top, it's okay, it's not ruined. Just dump the oil off, and you're still fine. Like I said, the flour, in order to get it dark, sometimes you have to just keep the oil in there, and the flour can only accept so much. But it's more important to have a little oil that you skim off and not have it burnt. Looking good. You can see when we grab it in there, nice and thick. Look at that. So we're going to add one heaping. Come back over here so you can hear me. Another important thing to mention about the roux is, because you cook the flour for so long, it does lose a little bit of its thickening properties. So don't be alarmed, even if you do it in stages, that you have to add a lot of roux, because it takes more dark roux to thicken than light roux. So I would say almost probably a half to a whole, like, double amount. So if you were making, you know, a gallon of turkey gravy at Thanksgiving and then you use a cup of roux, if you're making a gallon of gumbo versus you may almost use 2 cups of roux, just because it takes a little more when it's to start to thicken it.
Yep.
I hope that makes sense.
Yep. Someone asked, the thyme and the oregano looks fresh. Am I wrong? The recipe says dried. I think it's that you use all dried for your Cajun seasoning, but we use fresh with the meats.
Yeah, so for the grilled shrimp and chicken recipe, like in the instructions that are in the recipe that we shared, was for the grilled shrimp and chicken. So I used fresh herbs when we put it on the grill because we put less Cajun seasoning on it. Since we sort of blackened it and charred it in the pan, we used less fresh herbs because we used more Cajun seasoning on it to get that blackened effect. And the Cajun seasoning has a lot of those dried herbs in it.
Great. Yep, just showing you 2 different ways to do the same thing and maybe both ways will work for you.
Yep.
And then someone said the difference between the pre-made roux and the new roux is just the standing time. The color looks different. I think maybe this one.
Yeah, I probably cooked it a hair longer earlier, but as it sits, because it's in the cast iron pan too, which is black, and this is in a bowl. So you transfer that into a bowl, and this has been made for like probably an hour, hour and a half sitting. It does darken up as it sits because there's a lot of, in the Cajun seasoning, there's a lot of chili powder and paprika, and that bleeds out into the foil. And over time, it'll get darker as it sits.
And yes, there will be a recording made available. I'm recording this, and we will post it on our website at a later date. So don't worry. We'll have the recording.
I'm going to head back over. So we came up to a boil. I just reduced it down. Move this here. Turn this chicken off. Maybe a little hard to see because it's foaming. You see we're getting there. Just with that first batch. Still a little thick. Can you see that?
Mm-hmm. Yep.
So I'm going to add another spoonful. Keep it over here.
Matt says, can I come by and get some of this for dinner tomorrow? We should make a gumbo down in Prep Foods. I know, I so wish we could share food with people again soon.
And a little more. Chicken. Looking really charred. Put roux. And then so now it's a good time to taste it as well. See where we're at. I'm going to do that. As you can see, it's still a little thin. Good, it's got a good spice. Maybe that a hint of salt. The stock wasn't as salty as I would like. Put this out and add a little bit more roux. That's going to put us in a good place. We'll go work on some of the garnishes while this simmers. Smells really good. And add a little salt. I will say I made quite a mess today.
Again, dishes are my jam. It's cool. I get to close the doors of the kitchen, blast some music, and get my hands dirty. I love it. It's very therapeutic.
You see that? Yes, yeah.
Yep, that looks great.
Good.
Let me zoom in the camera.
Let that simmer. I'll use it.
Yep, you can go ahead and tilt it. Perfect. Can we see that?
thickening up. You can see it's kind of getting that trail of the spoon. You can see it.
Yeah, great.
That's when you know you're getting there. So I'm going to turn this on low. Let that cook out. Amazing.
Someone else said that when they make jambalaya, they do the same thing as they put the rice in the middle and do like a moat around the outside of the jambalaya.
Correct.
They don't like to mix the rice into the liquid.
All right, so for the garnish, we're just going to chop some scallions. We got some of these the celery leaves. I just like to keep whole, and we can just put them on. So it's nice garnish. We're going to take some parsley. And we'll actually add the parsley right to the gumbo at the end. Good way to chop it. You can take the stems off. Kind of ball it up as much as you can. And then if you ball it up, especially, it's not like going to be a garnish on the top. So if you squeeze herbs, sometimes they bruise and get dark, but we're going to cook with it anyway. So if you ball it up, then you can just go through it once and you'll get a nice fine chop without having to really hammer it with a knife.
I love recipes like this that are such a starting point, but you know, you've had so many things already just today that you can do according to how you like it. You know, blacken it in the pan or grill it or add spicy sauce or not. I love
really,
it. So customizable.
Really open to a lot.
Yeah.
So literally just making that gumbo broth with nothing in it, just the roux and the stock, and then like it even can make a nice jambalaya base, even, you know, or whatever you may want. So I'm just going to bring this over. Drop that in. I'm going to add, since we're just about there, I'm going to add in the chicken and let that simmer for a few minutes. I'm really excited.
Me too.
You can tell with the mask, but stop spinning. Spin the chicken in. Look at this. I'm going to help you clean.
No.
Grab way too many things.
No. Don't take dishes away from me.
Add the shrimp in. Just going to put it all in. This is all of the season as you go. Didn't seem quite salty earlier, but you know, so you put the chicken in, you put the shrimp in, so all those layers are going to keep adding the flavors. So you don't want to over season in the beginning. Yeah. This is looking great. And give it one more taste. Nice and spicy. Gonna come over.
Someone says you don't use filet. Is that because it wouldn't play nice with the blackened flavor?
Yeah, you know, the filet, it's a little easier to get than it used to be. If I was making like filet gumbo, like the classic, I would put some of that in there and it does help thicken it. But just because the basic Cajun seasoning recipe is real easy to make, it's got a lot of the regular spices you would have around the kitchen. I find it's enough.
And filet's sassafras.
It is, it's
right?
sassafras, like ground sassafras.
Huh.
So like what the like root beer.
Yeah.
And there's certain you know, certain people like it, certain people don't. It's really just a preference.
Right. Someone
At one
asked,
point, people thought it was poisonous, but
yeah.
it's not.
Someone asked, what is the bouquet, where it says, quote, remove the bouquet if you used one?
Yeah, so if the bouquet is, you would take the fresh herbs, if we used more fresh herbs, if we were grilling, or you could just add it. You would just take these herbs, tie a piece of twine around them so they don't just all spread out, and you could drop it into the broth.
You just don't want to eat that. So
Yeah, so you pull it out. So this is our garnish. I'm gonna bring it over. We'll just move this over. We got some rice I'll add in. So can everyone see that?
Yep, I'll zoom in on it too for people, but oh, look at that.
See that? Looking good. Thick, smells great. I'm gonna grab another ladle. Just gonna spoon some of the rice in there. Not gonna put a ton. But just move that over. Break the rice in there. You can see, nice, stewy, looking amazing. Smells great. We got a bowl here. I had a ladle kicking around earlier. See where I can find it. Here it is. So really to serve, you want to make sure you get a little bit of everything in there. Like that. And put some scallions on the top. Maybe something. Can you see that?
That looks beautiful. Look at that.
Smells great. Looks great.
It does smell so good in here.
It's gonna be a nice meal. And I think we're done.
Yeah, so we scheduled this class for about an hour of cook time and plenty of time for questions, since we knew it was going to be more of a demo heavy, question heavy possibly class. So now we have plenty of time for people's questions. Go ahead and type those into the question and answer. Someone says, are chicken and shrimp always both in gumbo?
They're not always in there, no. I've seen it made, classic, you could do like crawfish gumbo, crawfish andouille. Like I said, seafood, crawfish, oyster, shrimp. Andouille's usually always in there, or some sort of sausage. But as far as the proteins, if you're gonna use a protein, it's generally chicken. I've never really seen a lot of beef, just because the sausage is in there. But really, you could do whatever. Like I said, it's nice to make seasonal ones. In the fall, use some nice roasted squashes and root vegetables. I like to use turkey, like I mentioned earlier, and that's really nice and gives it a nice touch. You can even play with, I said white rice is the best, but you could put like a fall grain in there and whatnot if you really wanted to go off the rails, I guess. But I like the classic,
Turkey wild rice gumbo sounds interesting.
Yeah. So
people are just saying, thank you so much for a great class. They're excited to try it. Yeah, if people go and make this recipe, now that you've sort of watched our demo and seen how it's done, I'd love to see pictures. So if people want to make some gumbo and send me some pictures, I'd love to see that. Y'all have my email from all of the event links. But yeah, we'll leave the question and answer box open for a little bit in case people are furiously typing, or if you even have questions for Chef Michael that aren't around gumbo, that's fine.
That's right. I know my classes.
Happy to chat about
all the classes. I always end them like we do pasta classes and we do this class or that class. And I always tell Carrie and I tell the class, it doesn't just need to be a gumbo question. If you have any sort of cooking questions that have been on your mind,
you can also plug your next class.
Yes.
Chef Michael's going to teach with us again late April 26th. That's a Monday again, and he's going to teach us his fabulous asparagus risotto.
Yeah.
So another amazing dish that I'm excited to eat after he's done making it, but you can mark your calendars for that one.
Yeah.
But yeah, if anybody has questions, go ahead and put them in. I know it takes a while to type them rather than ask them, so I'll leave the box open for a little bit as we go. Someone else saying, looking amazing, can I come over and buy some to eat? Unfortunately, no, but maybe gumbo should make its way down to the prepared.
It may, yeah. Smells great.
I know, I wish we could like make to-go boxes for people, but one of these days we'll do in-person cooking classes again and get to eat with each other. I'm excited. Someone here says, being Cajun, I would have to add okra for taste and texture.
Sure, I know, I understand that.
I don't like it.
So, yeah, for me, you know, I did spend some time in New Orleans, and there was, it's like any cuisine, you know. I'm that way with other recipes where like it has to be that way. This is the way I was taught how to make it, so I've always been drawn to this method. And you know, I've never, even though I've worked with okra probably enough, not ever a lot, where enough where I was really comfortable with, you know, I was never comfortable with the texture. That's what I mentioned earlier. I don't know if you could hear me under the fan, but when I have used okra, I've always preferred to fry it, to bread it and fry it and use it as a crunchy garnish on the top. But you know, for me, the texture, it is a good thickener, and it's one of the classic methods and thickeners of this, if you like that style. But for me, it's a little slimy.
I don't like it either.
Yeah.
I wish.
But I get it.
All right, I'm not seeing any other questions coming into the chat, but again, I'll give people maybe like 2 more minutes just in case you're furiously typing. I will send a survey out to everybody tomorrow. I would love to know your thoughts on the class, thoughts on other live streams you'd like to see from Chef Michael and our other instructors. I'm always looking for new ideas because our instructors are great and there's such a wealth of knowledge that if there's a need out there for something that people want to learn, I'm happy to find an instructor to match that. But yeah, I'd love to know your thoughts. I'd love to see photos if you end up making this.
Yeah, me too.
And yeah, I love seeing where everyone's from. We had people from Australia tuning in today.
Oh, nice, nice.
And we have someone from California saying that our chefs are so informative, and thank you. I appreciate that.
Yeah, well, my pleasure. And I'm easy to find on the City Market website if you ever have any questions, or you can reach out to Carrie. And, you know, like I said, if I can answer the question, I'll get back to you as soon as possible. So feel free to always email me if you have questions.
Sounds good. All right, everybody, I'm going to go ahead and end the event. Thank you so much and enjoy the rest of your week. Thanks so much, everyone. Bye-bye.